Hey, so this is going to be a review of the movie Joker Folie Deux. As someone who dresses as the Joker on the internet and wears a lot of Joker shirts, like I'm currently wearing a purple Joker shirt now, I think I have a unique opinion and right to talk about Joker movies. So I'm going to go ahead and give my comment on it. And oh, I also did see it, by the way. Something different also from a lot of the reviews you'll see on the internet. A lot of people that are just bashing this movie like crazy haven't even seen the blasted thing. So yeah, I did see this yesterday morning. And actually, like I mentioned, there's a ton of internet reviews out there just ravishing this movie. And, I was expecting the worst when I went to see it Saturday morning. I was thinking, oh, wow, this is, this is going to ruin the first one for me, or at least I hope it won't. And I had already heard some of the spoilers in advance, what happens, which, okay, FYI, I'm not going to say the spoiler at this moment, but there are going to be some spoilers in this video about the movie. So I'd recommend getting out either now or in a minute or so, before I start going into those, because again, there are definitely going to be some major spoilers in this movie, some of which I wish I hadn't seen before I saw it. But anyways, yeah, I saw it on Saturday morning, and I was, for the most part, pleasantly surprised. Now, it wasn't quite as good as I'd originally hoped it would be. It was well, let me put it this way: my expectations were way too high going into it. Like way back before I saw the bad reviews. I mean, like way when I first saw the first trailer for it drop. I forget in April. I'll admit, I just loved the trailer for it, and I don't know, maybe it was because it was a bad day for me. I just gotten fired from one of my jobs, and it just seemed to be the best thing about that day to me watching that stupid trailer. And I don't know, maybe I started getting my hopes up a little too high for it. And there was this girl dressed like Harley Quinn where one of the stores I used to go, shop at up in Ohio. And me and her would talk about this upcoming movie, getting real excited for it. So I was almost trying to kindle a little bit of a relationship there before I moved to Arizona. And, so there was a lot of reasons I was maybe getting just a little too excited about this movie. But then, of course, I saw the horrible reviews for it, and I was like, oh no. But it actually wasn't that bad. I would say a 7 out of 10. And this is coming from someone who would give the first one a 9 out of 10. Obviously, the first one was better. It was actually, I don't know, maybe this would be more like 6 out of 10. I don't know. But the first one was a good deal better than this. I would not deny that at all. But that's not unusual that sequels are not as good as their predecessors. I mean, for those of you who ever saw Disney sequels, the straight to DVD sequels on some of those things, my goodness gracious, they depart so far from the quality of the originals on this that it truly is a spit in the face to the originals. And yet most of those originals are still loved. Like, I don't know, Lion King, they made a bunch of incarnations after that weren't very good. And actually those are good compared to like The Hunchback of Notre Dame 2 or Pocahontas 2 or... Oh, what are some of the other real stinkers? Some of the Aladdin, well, the Aladdins actually weren't that bad, the sequels. But, there were some of the sequels that were just unwatchable. And yet, I still enjoy the originals, as do a lot of people. This was by no means something like that. This was a $200 million budget movie with great acting in it, very well shot. But the problem with this movie, really the central problem, and this is my opinion, but I think this is a pretty good take on it as someone that's seen the first Joker movie a lot and has analyzed it a lot. The first one was truly a classic. But the first one took some major creative risks and maybe, just maybe, went an inch or two too far. It did put a serial killer in a pretty glamorized light. And again, this is coming from someone that dresses like the Joker and likes the Joker and Batman a lot. But sometimes they really, the pity and the glamorization of some of his violent acts was so much in there that I couldn't help but just slightly shift uncomfortably here and there about a few parts of it here and there. And that's why I would say a 9 out of 10, just because, I recognize that they maybe went just a bit too far at times in the first movie, and they kind of got away with it. Plus, it made $1 billion. This one, they went even further, and they went a few feet too far if there was like a line that you can go over, and they did not get away with it. They're not in the box office and not critically. They're not going to be able... I don't know why you would take even more risks on a sequel like this, but I think ego and maybe greed or whatever fueled Phillips and Warner Brothers trying to kind of push it a little too far on this. Phillips, I think, wanted to cement his status as the greatest director ever, And in doing so, he maybe just ended up making a movie, unfortunately, that fell short of what a lot of people were expecting. But still, I liked it a lot. And I think a lot of people, if they go into this with a more open mind, would like it a lot, if they're not expecting to be as good as the first. Now, so you're free to like or dislike whatever you want, okay? A lot of people are going to hate this movie, and I recognize that. We all like and dislike different things. But I mean, you know, this wasn't just some attempt to sabotage the first movie. I mean, why on earth would they have thrown $200 million at that? This wasn't some attempt to, I don't know, just some stupid cash grab either. Because if it was just a dumb cash grab, why take risks? Okay, why take a bunch of artistic risks on a movie with you would want to make it as generic as possible so you can appeal to as many people as possible and make as much money as possible. Well, that's definitely not what they did in this movie. This movie was very niche, and it was definitely not meant to appeal to a mainstream audience. The only conspiracy I can believe on this is that like Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix didn't want to make another sequel to this, so they wanted to make sure that this one they weren't ever going to be pushed to make another one after this. Maybe I can believe that a little bit. But the thing is, I mean, okay, I actually loved the first 80% of this movie. In fact, I would say up until that point, it was almost on par with the first, other than it was a little bit dull and didn't have enough action scenes in it, and the music scenes didn't quite mesh with the rest of it. And that's where one big point I would deduct from this one, keeping it like a 7 out of 10, The other two would be for how they ended the romance with Harley Quinn in this one and the way they ended the Joker's character arc. Now, from this point on, this is where the major spoilers are going to come in. So, spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. This is her last chance to get out. Okay, here we go. So, then the other 2 points, okay, well, like I was mentioning earlier, I would deduct, some points for the kind of slow pace and not enough action scenes in it. But, I mean, up until then, I still found it interesting, with all the court scenes where it follows his crimes from the first movie and his very, very interesting romance with Lady Gaga, who does much better than I expected than she would in her acting in this. And his Joaquin Phoenix, as usual, was great, in his role. And it was a little dull, but it still was very interesting to watch, However, towards the end, that's where it's kind of spoiled it for me. Because he disavows the Joker's character a little bit, says, well, I'm not Art. The Joker didn't do that. Arthur did that. I take responsibility for doing that. And then Harley gets really mad and dumps him. And, then you're presumed that he's going to be guilty, and, they announce him guilty. Then some guys blow up the courthouse, and he kind of escapes, and then he's instantly recaptured, which is kind of weird. And again, that I didn't like any of that. I thought that was just such an anticlimactic end to it that really fell short. Though a lot of people, weirdly enough, like the ending, so my opinion is probably a little different. But that really, in fact, that ended up bothering me even more than the big ending, which here we are coming to the biggest spoiler, because then after they recapture him and he's back in Arkham Asylum, another prisoner kills him, thus far ending the Joker arc, and that prisoner is heavily hinted to be the new Joker, with carves like the smile in his cheeks like Heath Ledger's Joker, So I didn't really like that either. I thought that was really stupid. I thought they could have I know they had to end Joaquin Phoenix's Joker arc because this character just really could not be made into the comic book iteration. So I understand why they brought it to an end, but they just had to. They could have had a less sloppy, less sad, and less depressing ending to this, That was the thing I didn't like. It was already a very dark and depressing movie, and the first one kind of had an inspired ending because he almost takes joy in the chaos and violence, and you almost see him like dancing on the stairs, and it makes you happy in a weird way for him. Whereas this one, the ending just left you just kind of depressed and bitter. It took an already depressing movie and it did nothing to alleviate it, and that's where it fell short. That's where I'd say it's a 6 or 7 out of 10, not a 9 out of 10 like the first one. They took it too far on that creative risk. Without trying to give it a happy ending or even a mediocre ending, they gave it a really depressing ending when it was already a depressing movie. So yeah, I've got to take off a few points. I didn't get, like I said, 7 out of 10 in my books, but I really liked the romance between him and Harley. I think it was a very interesting, twisted romance, making Harley the manipulator this time and not the Joker. I think, the scenery and shooting of this movie was beautiful. I mean, it should be on a $200 million budget. But, and I mean, the ending could have been worse, I suppose. I mean, they could have had him like, I don't know. I'm not even gonna go there. Sorry. But where I'm just going with this is that, I mean, there's a lot of hate being levied at this movie for just blind hate by people who haven't even seen the movie and by people who just kind of want to jump on the bandwagon of hating the movie because they see, I think, a lot of other people hating it. And you're free to hate this movie. If you have, hate it, I mean, absolutely. We all like and dislike different things. But I would say, especially if you like the first and you like the Joker and Batman, go into this, definitely give this a watch. This is definitely worth your time to decide for yourself whether you like it or not. And if you decide you dislike it, well, then that's, your prerogative. But what I would say is don't just write off this movie because of all the hateful internet reviews about it. There's a lot of, people, it kind of reminds me of the Star Wars prequels where people literally almost expected them to be as good as the first trilogy. And then when they were not, people just hated George Lucas something fierce for that. Like he was trying to intentionally ruin Star Wars. Well, I mean, anything could be further from the truth. If you saw now again, I know the prequels weren't as good as the original trilogy, but if you saw them, they actually, just like this, took more creative risks. They went, and they took too many creative risks, which was the problem. George Lucas delved too far into his own eccentricities and created weird and sometimes kind of goofy prequels, which were still a hell of a lot better than the crap Disney makes. But I mean, it just didn't measure up to the original. But people got personally aggressive towards George Lucas about it, which I never understood. And I also don't understand the hate that's being levied at Todd Phillips. I mean, he had a very hard sequel to make here. The first one was a standalone movie. It was not an easy one to make a sequel to, And, but he did the best he could, and it came up short because, again, the one criticism, as I've already levied, is that he just went too far with the dark, depressing theme and made it, and just with his creative risks, he took it too far, which is why it fell short of being what could have been almost as good as the first classic, But instead, it's just, in my opinion, a moderately enjoyable moderately enjoyable sequel to watch. In some people's opinion, they would not find it that enjoyable. But honestly, I think most people will find this at least to be anywhere from moderately good to moderately bad. I think the people that hate this movie are going in with either unrealistic expectations, or they were people who really actually hated the first one, but they weren't able to really say so because the first one did much better than people expected, and they realized they couldn't bash it as much as they wanted. So I don't know. I would strongly recommend, if there's a point of this video, to watch it and make up your own mind. Go see this movie. It's worth a watch. And if you hate it, feel free to hate it and say why you hate it. But just hate it for your own reasons. Don't just hate it because, the internet has gotten itself worked into a rage and tells you that you need to hate this movie, And again, this is coming from someone that dresses as the Joker, loved the first Joker movie, and, and still liked but not loved this sequel. So, as usual, thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye.